VMware Cloud Twitch streams, or what we call sometimes our office hours. I'm Matt Vandenbeld at vCloud Matt, and this week we're going to be covering Hybrid Cloud Extension, or what we also call HCX as our abbreviation. And we have with us an esteemed guest, another member of our team, Prasanna, who is at Prasanna Tech on Twitter. I highly suggest you give him a follow. If Prasanna, you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we can get right into the HCX.
Hey Matt, thanks for having me over. Hi everyone, I'm Prasanna, one of the customer success architects currently focusing on VMware Cloud on AWS. And so my role is to onboard customers and give overview about the service and stay with the customer to achieve their use cases and objectives. So yeah.
I just wanted to also add in there real quick. Anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to put it into the chat here on Twitch. If you don't want to sign up for an account, feel free to tweet me at vcloudmatt or at Prasanna Tech, and we'll answer that as best as we can.
Cool. Thank you, Matt. So just to jump right into the demo of setting up and configuring and doing migrations with HCX, I just want to give a very brief about what is HCX and what are the use cases HCX is going to solve for the users. So we can basically term hybrid cloud extension, or HCX, as a mobility and hybridity tool. It's basically a set of appliances which enables mobility and provide that hybridity. So I think in the first week we saw spinning up an SDDC and what are the prerequisites for that, and last week we saw about establishing IPsec VPN, configuring HLM, and doing migrations using cool migration and native Vmotion. So let's assume that customer is now at a stage where they want to exit out of their data center, or they would like to modernize their existing infrastructure, which is in a legacy version or an aging hardware. So these are some of the use cases that where HCX can be really helpful and we can achieve those kind of migrations, and in fact we can quickly evacuate data centers if that's a use case for some customers. In fact, we had customers who had to evacuate their data centers in a short duration, and they had used HCX to do that migration seamlessly and without any kind of retrofits for their workloads. So these are at least some of the use cases and why we want to use hybrid cloud extension with VMC. And one major benefit with VMC is that hybrid cloud extension comes with the service and users don't have to pay anything extra. And just to differentiate HCX from the other migration options we have, it enables us to move workloads from slightly older versions. It doesn't have stringent prerequisites. So we can even migrate workloads from, say, vSphere 5.x. And let's say, for example, your Vmotion subnet is not routed. So there are specific prerequisites that might be needed for other migration tools, but HCX overcomes those challenges, and it's really beneficial in these kind of scenarios. So yeah, that's pretty much a brief about HCX. before jumping into the demo. Now, Hdx basically has two sides. One is the cloud side and the other is the enterprise side. Now we will basically activate and initiate the service in the cloud side first. So let me start the demo with the cloud side of things. And to do that, we will first have to log into the VMC portal. So let me quickly log into that. And typically users will use their My VMware account to log in here. And this is our test environment, and you might be seeing some options which may not be available for end users yet. So typically users will see an SDDC, and we have like 4 SDDCs created. So let me get into one of the SDDC, and the Hdx option is available under add-ons section of the SDDC, and we can open the Hdx portal from here. So we are basically redirected to the Hdx portal, which has few additional options, and the most important option of deploying Hdx in an SDDC. So again, as I mentioned, there are two ends to this model. One is the cloud side. So now I'm just deploying the Hdx to the cloud side, or activating the service on the cloud side. So I just have to click on deploy Hdx against the SDDC of interest, and that's it. It's as simple as that. So it's going to run for about 5 to 10 minutes. It's basically deploying an Hdx Manager in the cloud side. And once this is done, you'll see something like this. We now have an option to open the cloud side Hdx Manager. Let me go ahead and open that. And you can see that the Cloud Manager has a specific URL with an Hdx suffix.
So just to be clear with everybody out there too, so HCX doesn't require HLM to be set up or VPNs to be set up or any of that stuff. Is that accurate, Prasanna?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we don't have any of those prerequisites.
So yeah, so you can pretty much just go ahead and deploy this right after you set up your VMC instance and start moving stuff in right away. As of note as well, it's usually quicker than this.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Prasanna, you want to tell them where you're located and then where these data centers are located. That might help explain some stuff.
Right. So our test SDDCs, I think it's in US West Oregon, and the enterprise side I'm going to use is in Las Vegas. Let me quickly open this again. Yeah, myself, I'm sitting in Bangalore location, so
So some of the other things that are going to be coming for HCX are integration with T is coming at some point. Currently, it doesn't do that. We're looking at supporting more clouds as well. So HCX Cloud, as we're showing here, is the version that's included with VMC. There is also, I believe they call it HCX Enterprise, which is a paid-for product that can migrate your virtual machines between clouds. It's kind of nice.
nice. Thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, I'm just quickly opening a different HCX. Let's see. Okay. So we will have to log into the cloud side portal using the same credentials as your vCenter, which is Cloud Admin. And basically, the first thing we will have to do once we log into the Cloud Manager is to request for a download link.
And just so everybody knows too, Persona kind of went by it because he's been through this a lot of times. But there was that start tour button at the beginning. If you're completely unfamiliar with the product, you can walk through this, and it's actually pretty good with walking you through kind of the features and setups and what all the screens are. So
Right. Good point. So you can see some basic information like what is the current version and uh, some of the other details. So whenever there is an updated version, you can see a small blue hyperlink here. You can just click on the option upgrade and it does the upgrade automatically. Now, so as I mentioned, we just have to request for the enterprise OVA. Now, until this point, we have completed the cloud side deployment, and once this is done, what is happening is it's basically deploying an appliance in the cloud side, which is called the HCX Cloud Manager, and you can see that it's the same URL as the Hdx Manager I just opened. Uh, and the next step is we have to move to the enterprise side or the on-prem side of things. And to start with that, we will need the enterprise appliance. So just click on this link and it's going to download an OVA. Just going to look something like this. So the OVA deployment is pretty standard. Just let me run through the steps real quick, but I already have it installed. I just want to show a key point. Just choose a destination, a cluster. And once we get to the network selection page, I will quickly switch over to a port diagram where we can discuss all the prerequisites. So until this point, I think it's pretty standard. We're just selecting compute and storage. And so this is where we are basically placing this HCX appliance on an on-prem subnet. Now we need to do some pre-work before coming to this step. We need to decide which subnet we have to place this appliance on. So and this will be a good time to jump to the ports required diagram. Just to walk you quickly through this diagram, in the left hand side you can see the cloud appliances, and the first appliance we deployed in the cloud is the Hdx Cloud Manager, and its counterpart which is the Hdx Enterprise Manager we are currently deploying. So that is residing here. Now it has few firewall requirements, and it basically needs to access its cloud counterpart over TCP 443, and it also needs to access the hybridity depot and these two URLs in order to make the upgrades possible. In addition to the external firewall rules, which is quite simple, it's not a very stringent requirement. There are few internal requirements which doesn't traverse WAN. It needs to talk to vCenter, it needs to talk to SSO, and it also needs to talk to ESXi management. So all these details are available in Hdx install guide, and in fact all the steps we are going to walk through are available in this install guide. I'll provide the link in chat towards the end of the demo. Now the reason I brought this up is we have to identify a management subnet to place this enterprise manager to enable all these communications. So I think in the pre-work stage or the analysis stage, we will be identifying which port groups to place this appliance. I will come back to the other two appliances shortly once we get to that stage. And I have identified that this port group has all the required access. So I'll go ahead. Of course, we can give all the DNS, the IP details. So there's a important point to remember. We'll be entering the admin and root passwords. It's important to keep this safe because it is required after the deployment and throughout the usage of Hdx. So I will cancel this out because I've already deployed this appliance here. And I have entered this or used this IP from the management subnet. Let me open this appliance or the Hdx Manager console to move on to the next steps, which is configuring the Hdx Manager itself. Now the password or the credentials would be the admin and password, whichever password we set during the OVA deployment. So it has slightly more details than the Hdx Cloud, because Hdx Cloud takes care of most of the things itself, but in the on-prem we have to link it to a vCenter, we have to configure an SSO source and things like that. The first steps we will be going through is to activate the Hdx Enterprise, and we can get this key from your cloud portal, which is here. Okay, I think I have it open. Let me give the right password. I already have this open, sorry. So you can grab the activation keys from here. We will have to create an activation key for the enterprise deployment. And if you once you hit confirm, it's going to generate a key for your enterprise. And you just have to copy and paste it in your on-prem manager. So that will be the first step. And the second step would be to choose the data center location. And this on-prem location is in Las Vegas. So I just chose that. The next step is to link to the on-prem vCenter. So this is important. We currently can pair one Hdx Manager with one on-prem vCenter, and just give username and password. If the user has NSX on-prem, we can also link NSX with Hdx Manager. This is not a mandatory step. This is an optional step. This is useful in case you want to extend like VXLANs. The next step is to configure the SSO itself. Typically, it's in the format of /PSE. And the final step under configuration is to assign roles or add administrators against system and enterprise administrator. So one of the issues we notice during the configuration step is users miss to configure this, and if they attempt to log into the vCenter, they don't see the Hdx plugin configured. So the first thing they will have to do is make sure that these two groups are populated with the intended administrators group. So I think we have reached the end of Hdx Enterprise Manager configuration, and we are ready to log in to the Hdx plugin, which will be now available in your vCenter. If you don't see it, you may have to log off and log in case you are already logged in. So let me open the Hdx plugin. So the first screen shows a quick overview of all the migrations and what are the current site pairings. The very first item we'll go through is to form a site pairing. Now, obviously, we are going to form the site pairing with our VMC counterpart. Let me run through the process so that it's clear. Now, where do I get this site URL? We can get that from the Hdx Manager, the Cloud Manager, which we have opened. So this is the URL which we have to use to make that pairing. Again, the credentials will be Cloud Admin. So it is going to go through that 443 outbound and reach out to its cloud counterpart and form the pairing. You can see that so actually I already had a pairing, but users for the first time will not see any available pairing, so they have to go through the registration of new connection. And this is the new connection I just did. So the next steps is pretty important. Now this is where we are going to deploy our WAN interconnect appliance, the optimization appliance, and the network extension appliance. So this would be the good time to go back to our port diagram and just discuss some of the prerequisites that are required for these appliances.
Quickly, before you do that, Prasanna, do you want to just go through which each one of those do for people and why they would want it or not want it?
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. Now, Let's so this I think we already did or completed the Hdx Enterprise Manager. Now the appliances in action is the WAN Interconnect Appliance and the L2C Appliance. Now what is the purpose of this WAN Interconnect Appliance? It is going to form a proxy between your on-prem ESXi host and enable the migration traffic over to the cloud side. Now this is the first time I saw this, this was quite brilliant. Uh, it, it, it was just magic, right? We were able to do migrations from our on-prem ESXi host over to the cloud side without doing any routing changes or major changes in the on-prem side. All we did was deploy this interconnect appliance. It is going to form a pair with its cloud counterpart, and just we can just start doing the migrations. So that is the primary role this interconnect appliance plays, namely the Vmotion migration and the bulk migration.
Just to add to that a little bit too. So that is one of the key benefits of HCX. Is that's actually WAN optimized as well, right? That does some fancy stuff to reduce the amount of traffic that's going across.
Yeah, so it's going to do all sorts of compression and dedupe. In fact, it's also very secure. It's using military grade should be crypto protocols to do that or form that tunnel with its cloud counterpart. So the third appliance is the L2C, or the extension service. So the purpose of this appliance is it is going to extend your on-prem networks onto your cloud side. So this is basically going to provide continuity for the workloads themselves. So this is not going to carry any of the migration traffic, but it is going to carry all the L2 traffic. Uh, let's say, for example, once you migrate over a section of virtual machines on that subnet, so those virtual machines doesn't have to change any IPs, and it continues to communicate over this L2 extension back to the on-prem side of workloads.
So this
So
this means that your workloads are live through this entire process, right? That's what that does.
right, yeah. So this is going to take care of the live vMotion traffic, and this L2 extension is going to provide that IP continuity for the workloads. So through the entire process, it's live.
It might be worth noting as well that where the gateway will still reside, it'll still be on-prem. Is that correct?
Correct. So yeah, I will touch upon it once we get to the demo. We have something called proximity routing, but it's not yet enabled. So I will touch upon that. Yeah. So these are the purposes of this appliances, but in terms of prerequisites, we have to make sure that we have connectivity to the ESXi management and vMotion port groups. So that connectivity is pretty important in order to make that proxy connection over to the cloud side. And WAN or outbound firewall requirement wise, it needs UDP 500 and 4500, basically the IPsec ports, in order to form that secure tunneling with its cloud counterpart. Similarly, the L2C appliance also is going to need the same outbound firewall rules. Uh, so one more important point to remember here is typically these appliances are going to have private IP. So it just can have a SNAT configured for that particular subnet, and it just can use it to initiate that connectivity to the cloud counterpart. In fact, most of the times our customers didn't configure any SNAT because those subnets already had some kind of SNATs configured and this outbound access available. So requirements wise, it's pretty simple. Now, one more important prerequisite for this interconnect appliance is it needs an IP address on the Vmotion interface if the ESXi management doesn't have Vmotion enabled on it. Now, this is an optional requirement, and it is only required if if the ESXi management is not capable of Vmotioning or this Vmotion port group is totally isolated. And so based on the experience, that is the case with most of the deployments. Vmotion port group is not routed. So what we are doing is we are going to assign an IP for this appliance directly on the Vmotion port group, and it is going to take care of all the migrations. So yeah, I think that's pretty much with the prerequisites. Now, one key point to remember here is whichever network we are placing these appliances on, that appliance that network itself should not be stretched. So consider these as management networks on which we are placing these three appliances. So that management subnet itself should not be stretched across to the cloud side. So that's an important point to remember. So yeah, having discussed the prerequisites, let's hope that we have all the details handy, and let's proceed to the next steps of deploying those appliances. Now, the first appliance we are doing is Interconnect Appliance, that green, this one. So we have to put it on a port group which has all those permissions or all those port access. And I know that this port group has both outbound access and this is the ESXi management network we are using. So I'll go for it. And I'll assign an IP and this CIDR range, a default gateway, and DNS. Now you can see that the Vmotion port group is optional. And as I mentioned, it is needed if Vmotion is non-routed or this ESXi management is not capable of Vmotioning. So
we should open a bug for that UI because that's not how you type Vmotion.
yeah, I'll so give a password. So once that is done, so another point to remember with WAN optimization appliances, it doesn't need any specific IP requirements. It just coexists with the interconnect appliance, and it has a non-routable IP assigned, and it's going to closely interact with the interconnect appliance. So no specific requirements. We can limit the bandwidth for this migration traffic as well if required.
Our team doesn't believe in limits, so
yeah. Okay, so we have moved on to the L2C appliance, which is this one. An important point to remember with this appliance is it is per DVS, or we need to deploy an L2C appliance per distributed vSwitch. So that is the reason where that will be the first option we choose, which DVS we are going to configure this L2C. So all the port groups we are going to stretch is going to reside on this distributed vSwitch. Now you have the option of adding another distributed vSwitch, and it's going to form, or deploy additional network L2C appliance. So in our case, let's just go for configuring for this distributed vSwitch. Standard options. Yeah, so this again is going to provide this outbound access, and Enterprise Manager should be able to reach or talk to this appliance. So I know that this port group provides those capabilities. I'll go for it. So let's go for and that's it. So once we hit finish, it's going to deploy these three appliances, and they are going to show up under Hdx Components tab.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, we kind of do this like a cooking show, so that we save some time. That's why we always got one in the oven, ready to go. We're not trying to cheat or hide how much time it takes. It'll take a little bit of time to deploy these, but it's more just in the interest of time to get us into the hour for demo purposes.
Right. So yeah, it's once it's deployed, they are going to form the tunnels with their cloud counterparts, and we just have to give it few seconds. And if everything is open, or the required firewall port is open, the tunnel is going to come up, and it's going to show green here. If it doesn't come up, the only possible reason I've seen is the firewall ports that are not open, or the subnet on which these are placed, they don't have any kind of internet access or SNATs configured. So yeah, so that's it actually. We are done with the cloud side and the enterprise side, and now we are ready to extend our networks and start migrating. To extend the networks, we can go to the extended networks. You can see that I already have a subnet extended. So for demo, I'll extend another port group. Yeah, let me choose this. Okay, I have to choose which pairing I need to extend this to. So I need to extend this to my vCenter here. So we can choose which L2C appliance we should be using for this particular extension. Now we have the option of deploying multiple L2C appliances. So this is just used for load balancing. Let's say this port group already has lots of virtual machines, and there are lots of chatters. I just want to spread out the load, so I can go for deploying a second set of L2C from the Hdx plugin, and choose that L2C here, and choose the gateway. It should be in the gateway / prefix length format. So this is the proximity routing feature Matt mentioned. This is not yet supported yet with VMC, but it's a roadmap item and should be available. So
yeah, can you mention maybe what that does, so people can know?
yeah,
And it does work if you were to use the enterprise version with some other clouds, and like Prasanna said, we are actively working on getting that working in VMC, which hopefully will be soon.
right. So let me hit on stretch and then explain proximity routing. So while this is still extending, now what happens is it's basically going to create a network on the cloud side. I can also quickly show that here. So it's basically extending the on-prem network onto the cloud side, but all the virtual machines that are residing in the cloud. So remember that this is the cloud vCenter portal. All the virtual machines residing on the cloud side and on that stretch network, they need to go back to the on-prem side in order to get out to a routed destination, because the default gateway is going to reside on the on-prem side. So once proximity routing is enabled, it can intelligently get out of the cloud side as well as reach out to the on-prem side. So that's the feature that's still on the roadmap. Yeah, I could see that the extension is complete. Let me quickly check what are the virtual machines that are available in those port groups, so that the next step is just to start migrating the workloads without doing any sort of IP changes or any retrofits. So quickly to check the connectivity over that L2 extension, let's do that. Let's see if there is any virtual machine on that extended network. So I placed a test VM on the first extended network just to do this connectivity testing. And I know the IP of this is .50. So let me ping to that cloud VM from an on-prem VM. You can see that it's going over that L2 extended network. If I ping something local, I can see that it's instantly reachable. So let me identify a virtual machine that is available in that L2C. Yeah, so this small VM doesn't have any OS, so I'll quickly use it for demo, but we can also do a real virtual machine once that small VM is done.
So another point to kind of maybe discuss here too, Prasanna, is the latency is something that you should definitely be aware of when you're doing these migrations, especially if you're moving, pieces of applications and not the entire application. You really have to work with your application folk to ascertain what the latency requirements are. Before you kind of do this stuff, or you might get yourself in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, good point. So the one more point to touch upon the prerequisites are you need to have distributed vSwitch in order to extend these networks, and you also need to have 100 Mbps of bandwidth as a minimum to do live migration. You can get away with lesser bandwidth for other types of migration, namely the bulk migration, but for reliable Vmotion, we need about 100 Mbps. Now, I've gone through selecting the options to do Vmotion. I've selected the destination side objects, and we know that in cloud side we have restricted permissions on the management folders, so I have chosen the compute folders, and you can see that the HCX has intelligently chosen the extended network, and it has correctly mapped to my on-prem network here.
You can also see there was there's two buttons there to upgrade virtual hardware and VMware tools. And this is something Persano talked about a little bit as well, about HCX has the ability, which is a little bit more of a benefit from HLM, to support multiple versions of ESX and virtual machine versions and such. But what you have to be careful about those boxes is if you want to ever move these back, and you're moving back to an older version, you can potentially run into some issues.
Right. Yeah.
And I think there's a requirement for hardware version 9 for virtual machines, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's the minimum required.
Yeah.
So let's go next and hit finish. And that's pretty much it. We have migrated a virtual machine to a public cloud without changing anything at all. And let me also quickly migrate a real virtual machine. I'm not sure if we'll have enough time. You know what? Let me demonstrate the bulk migration, and then we'll come back to doing the Vmotion of a real virtual machine. I just want to show the connectivity. It doesn't drop any connectivity, and it's pure magic in my opinion. So I think we have demonstrated the Vmotion. So the next option is bulk migration. Now, what are the scenarios we go for Vmotion, and when do we go for bulk migration? Let's assume that we have about 100 machines. Typically, there'll be like about only 10 to 20 machines which will not or which cannot withstand a downtime. So those virtual machines can be migrated using Vmotion, but all the remaining virtual machines can be done over bulk migration. So what it does is it basically precedes or syncs the on-prem VMs over to the cloud side without any impact to the running virtual machine. Now, once it reaches the end, or we also have the option of scheduling the cutover. So once it reaches the scheduled duration, it just turns off the source and powers on the destination. So this is not going to take too much downtime, but just the downtime it takes for rebooting a virtual machine and bringing it up on the cloud side. So let's do that. Just want to rush a little bit because we are almost nearing. So you can see that this is the second port group we extended to the cloud. So if I want, I can schedule. Let's say I want to seed all these 100 virtual machines over the weekdays and schedule the cutover during Friday evening or Friday night. So that is possible with this migration. But I'll just go for direct migration. So you can see that the Vmotion has succeeded already, and bulk migration is in progress. If you want to bring this machine back, you can click on this reverse migration and go through the same workflow, but now the destination will be your on-prem folders, not your cloud side. So it's going to bring back your virtual machines. So this is kind of revolutionary because you are doing live migration with a public cloud from your on-prem without incurring any downtime or retrofit. So, which is awesome.
And like you mentioned earlier before, this is completely free. This is thrown in with the VMC subscription. So no additional licensing for this in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so there is also a disaster recovery feature built in with Hdx. We can do simple protections of virtual machines on-prem, and during disaster we can recover them in the cloud side. Let me quickly go through that. So we again have to select the destination folders. So since it's DR, we have to choose the RPO that is required, and of course we can go for snapshots. Let me go for a 1 hour interval and one snapshot. So this is particularly useful if you want to restore specific point-in-time version. Let's say, for example, there's a ransomware attack or a corruption in your image, so you can do a restore just before that happened, and you are back in service. So again, you can place it on a stretched network or a routed network as per your wish, and that's it. So I've already protected a virtual machine. Just to quickly show you the recovery steps. So typically, let's assume that this is the primary site in which all the workloads and the vCenters are residing, and the primary site is down. So now I don't have access to this plugin or vCenter. So of course, we can do the recovery from our cloud side. Oh, this is not. I have to go to the. So there is an option in our cloud side or cloud manager under disaster recovery, where you can continue with the recovery steps. Of course, you can also test recovery. Typically, you have the option of placing it in a different network than the original network and do the testing, just to keep it completely isolated. And here is where you can restore it to a previous point in time snapshot. So that's pretty much all the options that are available. There are few other things I want to quickly touch upon. Yeah, you can see that the bulk migration is succeeded. Now, one important point to remember with bulk migration is just a second. So what it does is it renames the original virtual machine. It just powers down the original virtual machine and brings on the destination side up. So this is particularly useful in case you want to go back to this original source VM, or you can also use this as a pre-seed for your disaster recovery. Let's say, for example, you have bulk migrated your virtual machines to the cloud side. Now you want to use your on-prem just for DR purposes. You can use these seeds as pre-seeds for your disaster recovery, and I can show where to select the pre-seeded data in the workflow. Yeah, so you could see that there's an option called seed virtual machine, and you can select a specific seed which is already available on the destination. So this will minimize the time for initial sync.
Well, and bandwidth as well, or and data charges potentially as well.
Yeah, especially with the egress direction
So
from VMC
yeah, so to
outward.
do a little touch on that. So everything going in to AWS and VMC on AWS is free. Coming back out will be charged. So it's really handy to have this WAN optimization and HCX and that seed to really minimize those costs.
Okay. So one more important point to remember is we also have the site recovery as a service for disaster recovery. Now, site recovery comes with many advanced features which are not available here, such as priority reboots and IP customization on the fly, and many other features. So we may have to carefully go with choosing the right disaster recovery solution if we are looking at protecting large scale
Yeah,
workloads.
yeah. So touch on that. This really doesn't have any automation per se on its recovery. It just recovers. Whereas site recovery has a very robust, based on our SRM product, a very robust recovery automation tool set that we'll demo sometime here in the near future, maybe in a couple weeks as well.
Right. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I- so all we did was deploy 3 appliances in the on-prem, extended few networks, and that's it. We were able to migrate virtual machines without any downtime.
So, and as you guys can see, so what would you estimate we saved for kind of having some stuff pre-created? Maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe from deploying the appliances and such.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the neighborhood. So you can see reasonably in under an hour of buying VMC and setting up your SDDC, you can be migrating your workloads live into it, which I think is kind of fantastic.
Right.
So with that, I guess we got a couple minutes left here. If anybody has any questions, again, you can put it in the chat, or you can tweet at me at vcloudmatt or at Prasanna. You can Prasanna Tech. You can do that anytime as well if you have any questions. If you're watching this in a video or in on YouTube or anything like that, just feel free to kind of tweet at us and ask or have comments or something like that. But this is really quite a fancy product. It's constantly in development as well. They're constantly adding features and functionalities to make it even better. So I think it's a really cool thing.
Cool. So yeah, if there are no more queries, I guess we can end the call.
Yeah, so it doesn't look like any questions. Like I said, feel free to reach out to any of us at any time about this kind of stuff. And then I thank everybody for tuning in live and everybody that's watching this recorded video. Next week, we're going to have Paige Clapper from our team demonstrating our app defense product, which is kind of a really cool new security product that we have out there that is really picking up steam. And so that's going to be next week's show. And again, thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you next week.